We begin with breaking news as both President Biden and Vice President Harris assessed firsthand the damage caused by Hurricane Helene as it becomes the deadliest storm to hit the mainland since Hurricane Katrina. Right now, the president is heading to North Carolina, where he's set to receive an update on recovery operations. He left South Carolina a short time ago after taking an aerial tour of impacted areas in South Carolina, while announcing he had directed the Pentagon to deploy up to 1,000 active duty soldiers to help with the recovery efforts. Now, the White House says the president will travel tomorrow to Florida and Georgia. That's where the vice president is right now. She is about to give an update from Augusta on the White House's response to the disaster. We will be keeping a very close eye on her remarks, but she did speak to reporters before being briefed by authorities.
I've been reading and hearing about the work you've been doing over the last few days, and I think it really does represent some of the best of what we each know can be done, especially when we coordinate around local, state, and federal resources to meet the needs of people who must be seen, must be heard. These are very difficult times. And in a moment of crisis, I think that really does bring out the best of who we are.
Rescue and recovery efforts, meanwhile, are continuing. Officials say at least 176 people have been confirmed dead in the wake of the storm, more than half in North Carolina. The storm's true impact may not be known for some time, as washed out roads and widespread destruction have made it difficult for crews to reach remote areas. In mountain towns that have been completely cut off, North Carolina National Guard helicopters dropping off supplies and rescuing the injured. As of this afternoon, more than 1 million people across the Southeast are still without power. Duke Energy releasing these pictures showing damage to its substation in Asheville. Tennessee officials, meanwhile, say they'll investigate allegations against a plastics factory where several workers died and others are missing. Joining me now, NBC's Antonia Hylton is in Asheville, North Carolina. NBC's Morgan Chesky is in Irwin, Tennessee. And NBC's Ryan Nobles is in Augusta, Georgia. Antonia, let me start with you. What is the latest on the ground there, and talk about the impact of President Biden's visit?
Hey, Kristen. Well, there is so much need here in the Asheville area. Our team has been here at the site of a manna food bank operation since about 8:30 in the morning, and it has just gotten busier and busier. At one point, the line for people who are, in some cases, checking in right now, waiting for their turn to come in and get the supplies they need, it was stretching back to the highway, just to give you a sense. With an estimate of over 1,200 different cars coming through. Some of these cars, though, have up to 3 families in them. So to give you just a sense of the need here, people are coming here asking for water and food, of course. They're asking for formula for babies. We spoke with a mother earlier who said that the baby, the infant in their family, hadn't had proper formula in 5 days. Take a listen to some of the conversations we've had.
Asheville is just not prepared for hurricanes. We don't know where water is available. I know it's available, but we don't have any means of finding out where it is. We don't have cell service, we don't have internet. The radio is the only way that we're getting any kind of information.
And look, these folks are grateful that Biden was able to do the aerial tour and that he was not physically on the ground, because the level of disruption that would have caused, it's hard to describe. Right now, first responders are having a hard time getting out to some of the mountain communities outside of the city. There are people who are still saying they can barely get access to the internet, can barely get updates on the local supplies and resources available to them. So that's frankly the last thing they needed right now, although they're grateful to all the federal workers who are fanning out right now to give them support, Kristen.
And Antonia, let me follow up with you on that last point that you make that is just so important. How are workers trying to get the necessary supplies into some of those remote areas that are currently inaccessible right now?
Kristen, they are trying everything. Helicopters are going out into some of the more remote areas that you just frankly can't reach by road anymore. We've spoken to some of the families who have come from those areas who've described having to clear roads themselves just so they could go back out into the outside world and go check on family members. So first responders are doing a lot of that work. They are sending out crews that specialize in clearing very heavy debris and trees. We just spoke to a family that drove by moments ago, and they're Their own car had almost been entirely crushed by a tree, their home partially harmed by a tree. And so that is the sort of urgent need now. You might think that 5 days into all of this that they've got it figured out, but the reality is there are hundreds of people still unaccounted for, and that death toll, that number, about 175, 176, everyone says it's likely to go up in the coming hours and days, Kristen.
Just devastating and remarkable, of course, to see the community coming together behind you. Antonia Hylton, thank you so much for that great report and for your interview. We really appreciate it. Morgan Chesky, let me turn to you. Eastern Tennessee, obviously not an area that has seen a hurricane of this magnitude. How are the folks there holding up? What's the latest where you are?
Yeah, Kristen, an absolutely heartbreaking scene here in northeastern Tennessee. We've been on the ground now, had a chance to travel briefly with the Tennessee Army National Guard, and they have really become a critical lifeline on two fronts here, by air with Army Black Hawk helicopters and on the ground in delivering these supplies that are now being handed out to people in desperate need of help, Kristen. I mentioned those helicopters. They have essentially become a lifeline because, as you heard Antonia mention, in the Carolinas and also here in Tennessee, there are communities that as of tonight, almost a week after this horrific storm struck, are still essentially cut off. One resident telling me that there's one way in and there's one way out. And when you have a bridge washed out, that sums up the state of things. We know that the people there survived the storm, but they're in need of just about everything. There have been reports of helicopters taking generators, gas, food, water to hopefully sustain these communities long enough until some sort of emergency roadway can be built. Now, we're here in Carter County, one of the hardest hit, Kristen. We have somewhat of a silver lining to report today, and that is just 24 hours ago, the number of people missing in this county was 60, an incredible number. Fortunately, we just had a chance to speak with the mayor of the county, and she tells us that that number has dropped drastically down to just 3 people. Incredibly hopeful news there. And Kristen, she said in a lot of those cases, there were people living in these hard-hit rural areas that simply didn't have any cell service because of the extent of the storm's damage, and that they have had crews going in and around the damage zone to connect with these people, confirm that they're okay, and that's one of the reasons that list of missing has dropped so drastically. While we're here in Carter County, there's also significant news to report out of neighboring Unicoi County. That is where that plastics factory is located, Kristen, where multiple deaths took place. That company that runs that factory now under investigation by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, taking a closer look on if proper protocol was followed, because we know that multiple families are saying that employees at that plant were not able to leave in time to safely get to shelter, and as a result, were caught up in those tragic floodwaters. Still an incredibly dynamic scene here, Kristen, but today, I believe, is the first day, at least for this area in northeast Tennessee, that it's gone from a rescue mode into a recovery mode. Kristen?
Just devastating to hear the story about those workers in that factory. Morgan Chesky, we really appreciate your reporting. Thank you so much. Ryan Nobles, let me turn to you. You are with the Vice President in Augusta. What can you tell us about her visit and her message today?
The message that we heard from the vice president, and this is an ongoing visit happening right now as we speak, is her connection with the local officials here to ask them where there may be gaps in their recovery efforts and let them know that the federal government is here to help in case they need those gaps filled, and also to make sure that the resources that are coming from the federal government are getting here quickly enough so that they can be put to use right away. But it's important to keep in mind the scale of what we're talking about here, Kristen. You can see all the damage here behind me in Augusta, Georgia. We are 6 hours away from where Morgan Chesky is right now. This is a massive storm that encompasses 5 or 6 states. The federal government response here is going to be enormous. It's going to require billions and billions of dollars, and it's going to need to get them as quickly as possible. That's part of what the vice president is doing here, to express to the people of this community and beyond that they're here to help, and they're going to try and get those resources to them as quickly as possible, Kristen.
Well, and Ryan, as you know, former President Trump has criticized Vice President Harris, his challenger, and President Biden for their response to the hurricane. What has the reaction been to that from the Harris campaign, from the vice president?
Yeah, I mean, I think the White House specifically is trying to treat this not as a campaign issue, but instead an issue of the official office. They are doing the best they can to distance the vice president's campaign for president away from this recovery effort. But what they've said simply is that they were going to come here no matter what. They were going to be here and be a part of this recovery effort. But they wanted to make sure that a visit from the president or the vice president didn't disrupt the work that was being done on the ground. And they were even careful, as you heard in Antonio's report, about the way that both the president and the vice president visited these sites to make sure that they weren't getting in the way of that recovery effort. It's also important to keep in mind that, former President Trump criticized the vice president for raising money during the beginning of the hurricane. That's what he is now doing. He is not in this recovery zone now while she is here. He is out raising money. So there's a bit of a hypocritical stance when it comes to this. Of course, it's important to keep in mind, Kristen, that no one wants to talk about politics when you're talking about a recovery effort like the scale of the one we're dealing with now. But it will be in the back of the minds of the people that live here when they head to the polls in just a little more than a month.
It's such an important point, a critical state, undoubtedly, for the election. But right now, the focus, obviously, on helping that community rebuild. Ryan Nobles, thank you so much. I'm joined now by former FEMA Administrator Craig Fugate. He was in charge of the agency during the Obama administration and oversaw its response to Superstorm Sandy in 2012. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I'm hoping you can start off by just giving us a sense of the scale of what we all just witnessed, what those communities have just experienced. Have you ever seen this level of devastation from a hurricane this far inland?
Unfortunately, we saw this with Hurricane Irene in the state of Vermont. Populations were smaller, and if you go back in history in 1969, Hurricane Camille did the same type of damage except in Virginia. And I really want to give credit to the National Weather Service. This was a well-forecasted storm that we knew was going to be big, that we were going to see effects from the Atlantic to the Gulf, and that it was going to be an extremely dangerous, catastrophic rain-making event. So, the Weather Service got that part done. I think we really need to come back and reemphasize that many of the most deadly parts of a hurricane are not the wind. It is the water. And the inland flooding has actually, over the last 10 years, been increasing as far as percentage of deaths over wind and even storm surge.
And are there similarities, are there parallels that you see between Helene and Superstorm Sandy, particularly when you think about the fact that areas like New York were pounded?
The only similarity is an election year. What you're dealing with in the Appalachians and the Carolinas are that what you saw was already an area saturated, had a lot of rain, and then they get this extreme rainfall, and you get these multiple flash floods that are causing devastation. And I think, again, we see more of these extreme rainfall events. We've had history of this before, but what I see here is this is very much the focus area that's still in response is that area in the Carolinas, while much of the other regions are starting to get into recovery mode as power comes back up and they completed their search and rescue operations.
And obviously, there are still so many who do not have power or water. How long do you think it will take until that can be restored to those communities?
Well, it really goes back to the damage. And again, I think utilities have done a great job of getting things back up where they can. But you've got to rebuild power lines. You're having to rebuild substations. And in some cases, people will not be able to take power because there's too much damage to their homes or businesses. So, you'll get everybody turned on quickly, then it slows down. But it also is not a lack of crews. It's just the work that's got to be done to rebuild some of this infrastructure.
And obviously, we've been talking a lot about the recovery operation. How long do you think that will take, and what role should FEMA play?
This recovery is going to take years, if not a decade. We go back to Hurricane Katrina. We were still doing repairs from that 10 years after that storm hit. FEMA's role is going to be really focused right now on helping these communities get to a point where they're stable enough to begin recovery and begin funding repairs and replacement of the losses. But we're also going to need other federal programs. There's a lot of agricultural impacts. There's going to be a lot of housing needs that go beyond what FEMA can do. So HUD's going to need additional funding, federal aid highway for all of the federal highways that got damaged and destroyed. So I think when they get to the numbers, we're going to be looking at a rather substantial amount of funding required to help these communities not just get back, but also build back better for future disasters. The last thing we want to do is replace something only to set it up to be failed in another event.
So that's exactly my next question to you. What does FEMA need to do to prepare for future events, particularly given the fact that this hurricane was so strong, was so large in terms of its size, and quite frankly, the damage that it was able to do?
Well, FEMA has been doing this for some time, and I think this goes back and reinforces that we cannot build our infrastructure, in many cases, based upon weather events over the last 100 years, because it's not preparing us to go forward. And so FEMA is working to say, if we're going to rebuild something, we're just not going to build it back to what we had before. And in some cases, not even build it back to the current building codes, but putting more emphasis on funding that structure. So like a fire station or a school is built for future risk, not just what we've seen in the past. It takes a little bit more money on the front end, but it saves money long term as it reduces the impacts of these storms.
Well, former FEMA Administrator Craig Fugate, we really appreciate your insights this afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.